the development site and wish to speak in support of the application? Just in one present, just to make sure. I'm assuming.
Chair, I think the Logans are, I think they might be indicating they're trying to speak. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Peter Logan, I believe. I was just waiting for Gerald to say something in a moment.
Oh, that's mute. Unmute.
Do we have a Peter Logan?
Yes, we are here.
Excellent, excellent. And I believe you may have sitting alongside you a Mr. Mayor Eden as well?
No, it's Diane Logan here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right, indeed. Forgive me. That's okay. And I've also got
Mr. Eden is in the meeting.
He's in the meeting, okay. And I believe there's an Andrew Pavord.
Chair, I believe he has not joined us today.
Very good. He's outside of the meeting. It's fine. That's fine. Very good. Very good. In that case, if I just explain to Ms. Logan and wife that I'd ask you please just to indicate who you are and where you live. We don't need your exact address, simply the street will suffice, okay? I'll then invite you to make your presentation. I'll give you 3 minutes to make your presentation. And of course, at 30 seconds, I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds to remain, okay? Is that all right? That's okay, okay. In that case, can I first of all ask you to formally introduce yourself to the committee?
Yes, I'm a local resident. My name is Peter Logan, and I will read a message of support from our group of residents living at 38 Copperfield Street, located approximately 50 metres from Blackfriars Crown Court.
Thank you. Thank you. In that case then, Ms. Logan, I'd invite you, you may begin your presentation now.
Thank you. We support this imaginative, innovatory redevelopment of the existing court buildings. We welcome opening the ground floor with street level windows. We welcome gardens on upper levels set back from Lomond Street, and we welcome the gardens being open to both public and occupants of the new buildings. We applaud the environmental integrity of recycling and building on the existing fabric of a building no longer suitable for its original purpose, printing newspapers. Fabrics Development Company have previously demonstrated their architectural philosophy with a successful conversion of a sinister closed-up police building, transforming it to a lively, open and welcoming building. Here, severe brick walls were replaced by generous glazing, and the character of narrow Copperfield Street, where the building was located, became lighter, and we residents all felt, when walking at all times of day, much safer. We anticipate the new design of the court buildings will extend these safe feelings, and by the openness of the design, create a community hub, encouraging more occupational diversity, more pedestrians and cyclists to our area. The proposed plans were presented to us with great clarity, and we were given opportunities to ask questions, and during ongoing discussions, we felt our thoughts and suggestions had been included in continuing fabrics presentations. We were impressed. Their plans acknowledged the importance of the environmentally and ecologically friendly and every way following climate change guidelines. Close neighbour to the court, Andrew Pavard of Film Fixer and representing unheard local businesses, endorses our letter and their development and the development plan.
30 seconds remaining.
As almost finished, recognizing the opportunities and economic advantages the new buildings promise to our area, we all recommend acceptance of this application.
Brilliant timing, if I may say so, Mr. Logan. Thank you. Okay. Are there questions from the committee? Oh, very well. I can turn that off. No, there are no questions. In that case, then, I want to thank you, Mr. Logan, for your presentation. It was clear, it was crisp, and I can see that committee members clearly understood your support for the applications. Thank you for taking the time to attend today. Thank you. Thank you. Of course, continue to listen. Of course. Thank you. If I now move on to the last, but of course not least, ward councillors. Is there a ward councillor present that wishes to speak? I believe either Councillor Morris or Councillor Noakes, maybe.
Yes, Chair, Councillor Morris.
Oh, right here. Should I explain to you the procedure, Councillor Morris?
Oh, please do, Chair.
Good pleasure. Just to remind you, I will give you 3 minutes to make your presentation. I will indicate at 30 seconds what time is remaining. And of course, I would encourage you to lead members of the questions you'd like them to follow up with. Thank you very much. Please introduce yourself, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Adele Morris, and I am one of the ward councillors for Borough and Bankside, in which this application sits.
Very good. You may begin your presentation now.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an amazing development. You know, it's got fantastic greenery, public open spaces, loads of potentially amazing credentials. But I'm afraid that's where my compliments stop. I acknowledge that the Logans and the residents in 38 Copperfield Street are supportive of this, but sadly not all residents in the local area are supportive of it. Because this is going to change the nature, the character and the nature of the area quite considerably. There's an awful lot going on in this, and it is different from the other office buildings because of the additional restaurants, cafes, bars, open spaces, and indeed a projected increase of 2,500 new jobs. So the concerns that people have raised are, at the moment, it is quiet at the weekends and in the evenings. You know, from the previous use of the court development, and indeed a lot of the office developments in the area are only in the week during the week time. So there are some concerns about how how the public open spaces and how any restaurants and cafes are going to be managed, and how the impact on the neighbourhood is going to be managed from all the increased footfall. There are a number of concerns about the height of it. It is a tall building. This isn't necessarily a site that's been identified for a tall building. It's not a corner location. It's not a prominent site. And paragraph 6, I think it is, of the report really talks about the scale of this building and describes the neighbourhood as being Victorian warehouses and modestly proportioned historic industrial buildings. So there are some concerns from some local residents that the scale is too great. I'm a little bit concerned about the daylight and sunlight impacts, as I always am, and I hate that expression, urban context, and I hate people being told that if they didn't have the balconies, they'd have better light, because the reality is they have got the balconies. We're dealing with the situation, and I don't see why residential amenity should be compromised for new development. You know, the benefits of new development, of course, are welcome, but I really am concerned about how frequently the residents are compromised. And indeed, in Whitehill houses, they haven't been there for 10 years. They've been there for a lot longer, and they're not houses; they are flats. There's a number of flats within those developments. I wanted to ask particularly about the service and managing. So assuming that this will be approved, because it will be approved, I'm concerned to make sure that actually all of the environmental credentials, the greening, etc., as promised, gets delivered as has been promised. I know Councillor Whittam's point about the stag beetles and just how long it actually would take to get stag beetles established on site. The servicing and management plan, obviously, you may or may not be aware that that area is going to be subject to a low traffic neighbourhood, and I want to make sure that has been factored in, taken into consideration where all the servicing and management plans are being drawn up. The trees, one of the trees in Sawyer Street has already gone. There are mentioned in the report, I think nine trees in Sawyer Street and Pocock Street, I think it was. One of them's already gone and 2 are in poor condition, and we've had that confirmed by the arboricultural officer. And then hours of use of restaurants, terraces, and the management of any restaurants and terraces has to be very carefully done so that it doesn't negatively impact on the residents who you know, when people are exiting or, well, using the terraces, because I'm not sure there's...
Forgive me, Councillor Morris, I've got so involved in your dialogue, I've got the time is now up.
Oh, no!
I'm really sorry.
I've more or less finished.
I suppressed my phone for a reason I don't understand, but thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and forgive me, I apologise to others. It was not intended to give Councillor Morris preferential treatment. Oh my dear. Anyway, I see 3 digital hands up, and I will now begin with Councillor Livingstone, followed by Councillor O'Brien, followed by Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Livingstone first of all.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation, Councillor Morris. As you might have heard at the beginning of the presentation on this item, this is an application that has had 33 submissions of support and only 5 objections. So I note your comments about how there's been some support and some objection locally. It does feel as if the balance of people that have certainly made submissions seems to be in favour of this application. So I just wondered what your observations were on that point.
So I think my observations are that some of those are residents, supporters, as indeed the Logans have expressed, the people who live in their development. But some of the supports are people who want to work there. You know, Andrew Pavord, he works at Film Fixer, so it's local businesses. And obviously, whilst the comments of local businesses is important, the impact on residents has to be of our primary concern when we are approving any kind of development in Southwark. We have to take into consideration any negative impacts that might arise from a development on local residents. So people who might want to work there, who might want to use the restaurant in the future, who live in, I don't know, could be anywhere in the world. When I sit on the planning committee, I'm less interested in those. I am interested in immediate neighbour support, and which is why I've referenced several times the support from the Logans. But there are equally people who don't support, and unfortunately, they're people who literally contacted the ward councillors this week to raise their concerns. Hence why they haven't been formally submitted, even though we did ask them to.
Thank you, and I do know that the objectors have not yet been able to get themselves together, and you're their councillor. But I'll move on to Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Morris, just in terms of noise impact and loss of amenity with local residents, are there any conditions that you feel the committee could apply that would benefit that situation, or do you feel that the conditions that are already in the officer's report would be sufficient?
I think the hours of use of the sort of the cafes and the restaurant, I think, are fine. They're kind of our standard ones. But what we'd be looking, so as I also sit on the licensing committee, we frequently have applicants coming who got planning permission for a restaurant closing at 11 o'clock at night, and then they come in for a licensing application for later hours, and then they go back to change the planning, etc., etc. So I'd like to be reassured that there can't be incremental increases in the hours. The one overriding thing that I apologies, it may well be in the report or it may be in the conditions, and apologies if I have missed this. So it talks about closing the roof terrace, the east roof terrace, which is the one that is available to the public. But the rest of the roof terrace, I'm not quite sure whether or not there are going to be corporate events happening on there till the early hours of the morning, because I haven't seen any restrictions, but I'm happy to be corrected by the officer or whoever if in fact that is the case. So that would be my concern, would be, as we have had on some of the other commercial buildings in the area, when they get roof terraces that are unrestricted, they have some parties that do affect quite a considerable radius of residents.
Thank you. We can ask officers that when
Yeah,
it
we
comes.
will. Yeah, definitely will do that. Councillor Whitehead.
I think my primary question was in relation to the conditions and whether Councillor Morris would propose any additional conditions. I have a question. Councillor Morris raised a good point about urban greening and ensuring that actually occurs, and the urban forest that the applicant referred to. Chair, would you prefer that question be asked later, or do we want to discuss it now?
Sorry.
It's not a question for Councillor Morris, to be clear.
Right. Oh, we'll do that later in that case.
Okay.
Just one question for Councillor Morris at this stage. Are there further questions for Councillor Morris? I might ask a question if I may, Councillor Morris, as you are familiar with the process here anyway. There were no objectors. The overwhelming majority of those who responded, who presumably received the notification, as would any potential objector, appear to be broadly in favour of the application. And indeed, unusually, we had a supporter attend here as well. So how representative are the views you're expressing of those who potentially might object to the application? How are you gauging the level of the opinions of local residents in respect of this application?
So we were contacted by, at the beginning of this week, we were contacted by a local resident who actually lives in Pakeman House, which is in fact on the other side of Great Suffolk Street. They're the people most concerned about the kind of additional traffic of 2,500 new employees going to and from the tube or the bus. And the change in the area. He has door knocked his neighbours. I mean, you know, that's why I've said, you know, we haven't got anybody who was willing to come and speak today, but they asked me to represent their views. He asked me to represent his views, and we have another resident who had contacted Councillor Notes and asked to have their views represented. So yes, it is probably divided opinion in the area. As you can see, you've had people supporting. To be totally honest, I think that residents in Borough and Bankside can't be bothered to come to object anymore to planning committee, because quite frankly, nobody ever seems to take any notice of what they say. So, you know, there is a lot of apathy now in the area, and we try really hard. We get in touch with people as local councillors. We inform them when there are some significant applications, etc., and the general response is, why would I bother? Things like the daylight and sunlight, for example, you know, it's like, oh, well, it's an urban context, you know, your outlook is pretty rubbish as it is. So if it's a bit more rubbish, so what, who cares? Actually, the people who live there care. The people who have to have their lights running all year round now, who didn't have to before, whose electricity bills are higher, and ironically, who are often living in social housing, as indeed are the people in Whitehill houses. Rant over. Thank you, Chair.
All righty. That's an interesting one. I'll get you another time, don't you worry, Councillor Morris. But, thank you for that. Are there further contribution from committee members to Councillor Morris? If not, I will now move forward, and thank you, Councillor Morris, for your presentation and responses to committee members' questions. I'll now move forward, and if I may open up to those other questions which we might want to refer to officers and others. If I can go back to Councillor Whitehead, your outstanding questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to explore a bit more the urban greening proposals particularly, and I my understanding, looking through the planning conditions and previous discussions we've had on this point, is that there is no condition which requires a certain minimum number of trees to be planted on this development. So I'm just concerned about the sustainability of that proposal and whether that will actually happen in practice. So I guess it's a question of, is there a condition, and if not, should there be?
Okay. Interesting. Maybe we wish you to take that one. Patrick or Ewan?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
I mean, there are two. There was one condition now. Originally, it was two conditions on the decision notice, but now it's a combined condition relating to ongoing maintenance of the green walls and ongoing maintenance of the landscaping. Like I say, they're now merged into one condition. That's the hard and soft landscaping condition that's in the addendum. In terms of how it secures, I think Councillor Whitehead's issue here mainly is with, can we be reassured at this stage that there would be a specific number of trees? And the answer to that is no, but because the details given at this stage are indicative, but the condition 14, which is hard and soft landscaping, certainly deals with the ongoing maintenance of any trees that are delivered on the rooftop. So it ensures that the same size and species would be provided where a tree or a shrub is found to be dead or damaged or diseased, and it requires that kind of maintenance to be ongoing for at least 5 years after the permission. There is then a completely separate element, which is the urban greening factor, and there is a condition that requires the urban greening factor score of 0.45, which is very good, and which I refer to in the committee report as having been commended by the GLA and representing kind of exemplary urban greening. And so to achieve that 0.45 score, the applicant is going to have to deliver meaningful greening on the roof. Realistically, it's going to have to include some trees. We're not, like I say, we're not specifying at this point how many trees there would be. But like I say, to achieve 0.45 is going to require meaningful greening and good coverage. And so realistically, there will be a number of trees here. It's difficult to say quite how many at this point in time, but generally speaking, the final hard and soft landscaping details should be in accordance, or generally in accordance, with the indicative details shown at this stage. I think the plans show about 27 trees at the moment. Perhaps Clive Nichol of Fabrics can comment, because he was saying how he was looking to provide more than that. But as the indicative plans show, around 27, we would expect a similar number to be proposed in the final landscaping scheme submitted post-approval. Very
good. I wonder if Clive wishes to make any further comment on that.
Yeah, I'd just say the key reason, I think it should be regarded that we're delivering that, because the infrastructure that we are building is like nothing else on an office building ever. So it's got a passive irrigation system to create a blue roof which holds water like it would in a natural environment. The cost of doing this is enormous. The tree pits, no one's ever done it because it's so expensive. So to create all of that infrastructure and then go put 2 trees on the roof, it doesn't work. The brand of this building, the name of this building is going to be Roots in the Sky. So it doesn't work to not have roots in the sky. It's a major part of the marketing of the building as well, and it's a major part of demonstrating to people of what is possible with buildings in our cities. And I appreciate the questions of people really wanting to make sure this happened, but we are providing the infrastructure to make it happen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. I'll now move on to Councillor O'Brien, followed by Councillor Morell. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up on the use of the East Terrace, and just an assurance from officers that the time restrictions will be adhered to and are the same as the other terraces, basically.
Yes, thank you. I'm just trying to locate the condition.
I think, Patrick, it's 32, 33 and 34, I think, are the conditions of the hours.
Yes. Yeah, so 33 and 34 are dealing with the restaurant and ancillary terrace. Oh yeah, sorry, here we are. So condition 35 ensures that the East Terrace, essentially the office employee terrace, would close at 10 p.m. Mondays to Sundays. Sorry, would be open between 7 and 10 Mondays to Sundays.
Yeah. Yeah, so I might want to comment that later on. You had your response, Councillor Bryan. I'll now move on to Councillor Morell. I'll see Councillor Whitehead again. Councillor Morell. Councillor Morell?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted some reassurance on, the whole design of this is the biodiversity and the green roof and that, which is pushing the boundaries of most probably engineering and architectural processes, and as the applicant has said, will be very expensive to do. What I want assurances of is that we won't get minor variations coming down the line that would water down the concept that they're proposing. So I want reassurances that conditions within what we're doing tonight will stop any watering down of the process, because that, this is the big.
I'm sorry, Councillor Morell, we lost you for a moment there. Could you repeat what you just said, your last sentence?
Yes, Chair, my internet is very bad. I apologise for that. But what I want is some reassurances that we won't further down the line get some variations come in that might water down the conditions we're okaying this evening, and that the conditions we have are tight enough to make sure that the biodiversity element of this building is achieved because of the expense of it.
All right, well, I'm not sure if that was meant for Patrick or Mr. Nichols. I suppose it's a question of weighting the biodiversity versus the usual planning. Yes, sorry, go ahead, Councillor.
Gotcha. It's to the officers to make sure that we've got the legal and the conditions in place. So in sort of 6 months' time, when they find out they can't afford to do as much as they want to do, that we don't get a watered down of this application.
Yvonne or Patrick, do you want to make a comment?
I mean, I would just go back to the previous point that there are two separate conditions on the decision notice. One dealing with hard and soft landscaping that will require section details, this kind of thing, so you can actually see the depth of the roof pits. We've got some indicative details looking at about 1.7 metre deep pits, so they're going to be able to accommodate really quite mature specimens, and that will be, like I say, expected to conform generally to the indicative details. So the hard and soft landscaping element will be dealt with by that. And then there's this second requirement on the applicant to achieve this high score of 0.45, which reasonably they can only do with good roof decks, high quality greening, and that would realistically need to include some trees. Really, that's as far as the conditions go. Perhaps line manager can suggest some way in which it could be strengthened if indeed she thinks it needs to be, but I would contend that probably those two conditions cover it. But like I say, maybe Yvonne can comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think, if I'm interpreting correctly, Councillor Morell's question was probably a little bit broader about, the general design approach, the general quality, and the offer of, the public offer, and so on. So, if I've interpreted that correctly, we have a lot of, we've got an unusual level of detail already established with the applicant in terms of the Section 106 clauses, for instance. We're a long way further down the line than we sometimes are. And similarly with the detail of the design, we've got a lot of details already available to us, and they would all be secured. And you'll know that it's not unusual for people to come back with different degrees of refinement, if you want to call it that, of schemes as they go forward into construction, because sometimes things do need to be refined to be delivered. But since all of these factors are stressed in the report as being important to the balance of benefits that you're asked to consider when you're making your decision, I think, I would ask you to be confident that we would not expect them to be eroded to any significant degree, because then the weighting of the benefits versus the disbenefits would have been quite different. So, and I do hear the applicants, and I think they have a genuine desire to deliver what what is being presented. Yeah, but inevitably there'll be a small degree of refinement as you move into construction.
Very good. Thank you very much. And I hope, Councillor Moore, you've been reassured. If I may go on to Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. This is a slightly different topic around the community space. So paragraph 371 of the report, I believe, addresses, or the paragraphs preceding that address the cost of running the community roof space and refer to how a non-profit organisation will be set up to manage this space. It adds that the contribution from the applicants during the initial period before the non-profit makes a profit, it seems a bit of an oxymoron, but I think I understand what's being said. Before that point in which they generate revenue to be sustainable, they will contribute £20,000 per annum. And that's said to be covering salaries, maintenance, events, lighting, utilities. Now, I guess I'm slightly struggling to understand how £20,000 per annum is going to cover all of those things. And therefore, I'd like to, I guess, get a bit of reassurance that there is one other sources of funding that already exist, or there is genuine interest in providing funding. And two, clarity on if those sources don't actually arise, so the funding isn't secured, then how will this community space be provided for if £20,000 is the limit of the applicant's payments?
Indeed. Thank you. It's a good question. It is a good question. Patrick, respond initially.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. As the heads of term set out, £20,000 is the sum that has been agreed with the applicant. So if you make a decision today, then you're making a decision on the basis of those obligations as set out there. So £20,000 is secured. As it sets out, it is essentially subsidising the non-profit organisation until their activities become profitable. I'm not an expert in how non-profit organisations raise additional sums, but we've had some experience on other applications recently where non-profit organisations take on these responsibilities for publicly accessible spaces. And there, as I understood, the non-profit organisation can raise funds separately and use that to complement their activities, as they may well be able to do here. Possibly Clive can better advise on this, but in terms of the appropriateness of that sum, it is equivalent to sums we've secured on other schemes for the management of public gardens and similar spaces of a similar size. So that's why we accepted that sum. But like I say, possibly Clive can give a little bit more detail on how he felt that would adequately cover the non-profit organisation's costs in the run-up until they become profitable.
Yeah. Clive, would you want to make a further comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So you'd be right in pointing out that £20,000 isn't enough to fully subsidise something like that without any additional funding. That space, down to the different rooms it's got in it, the way the kitchen works, has been designed with consultation with the local partners we expect to take that space. That could be led by one local partner or a number. So I mentioned Bankside Open Spaces Trust, who can help us with the garden and make sure that can be a community project in terms of its maintenance and the people who come in there. Better Bankside to run different projects there, Safer London, Living Bankside. So we've got Amir on the call here who maybe could talk about how they would use the space and how that would get funded. But these organisations get funding to run things and to operate themselves. Not the issue they have is they have to rent spaces often. So this is, this will not be charged as a rent. The only time a rent will ever be charged is if, for example, Living Bankside are doing something for a corporate and the corporate's putting money into that, which will then go into the future running of the community benefit. And also we can't promise it, but we envisage that the sort of occupier that takes this building is going to be very, very conscious about this building representing their values. It may be that an organisation actually sponsors the community barn and actually funds it even more so. So these organisations can be more impactful in terms of the things they do. And yeah, that's it. I guess.
Okay, thank you. And it is one of these pertinent questions. One of the attractive features of the application is this community element. Management of it and sustainability is an interesting question. Not sure if it's a planning question, I might add, but in fact, the space has been designated for community purposes is the remit of this committee. And I might have, with a bit of hindsight, taken further legal advice as regards given approval for what is a communal space, but not having an assurance that that space is sustainable. I don't know if Margaret's still here, but in terms of what the committee is able to do to secure the space and ensure it remains community space, whether it's financially viable or not, is one of these interesting moot points. Is it moot, or should we be concerned? Maybe I take some advice. If Margaret's,
Yes.
I can see
Yeah,
you.
I am here.
Yeah, there you are. You might want to just give us some guidance on this, please.
Well, Chair, the benefit that you're seeking to secure for the site is to mitigate planning harms and to compensate for the loss of the D1 community space. And therefore, because you're examining issues to do with the sustainability and management of the community facilities that are on offer here, it is definitely a question that is directly related to the material planning gain that is under consideration. I think it would be different if community benefits were being offered, such as off-site payments that were not directly related in scale and kind to the benefit to the application that's under consideration.
And do I interpret that mean that it is a material planning consideration to ensure that it remained in community use? The question of sustainability, financial, it needs to be maintained by somebody. So when we say community use, does that mean that he says the council has a interest therefore and to ensure that it is maintained, or is it the applicant who has to ensure it is maintained for community use?
I think it's a fine distinction, Chair. I mean, what you have here is, as the planning officer has said, is an unusually detailed set of proposals for how the space is going to be managed and maintained. And in my view, that's perfectly lawful in terms of the consideration of this particular application. I mean, normally, as you're probably aware, the actual details of how a scheme is going to be managed and maintained in the future is often put in much more general terms into the Section 106 agreement. And I hope I've answered your question, but please
You have.
give me any follow-up that you need.
Yeah, this is a benefit of hindsight, but it has been brought up here as part of our dialogue, and I'm notwithstanding your comment and Mr. Nichols' comments on the potential viability of that space. I hope we're not leaving a hole here which has not yet been fully filled. It's an interesting one. It is an interesting one. Thank you, Margaret, for the contribution. Are there further comments from committee members, first of all, on this particular issue? I note that Councillor Morris is still here, and of course, it's one of these issues which will keep reoccurring, notwithstanding the issue from whether a committee takes note of local opinions or not. it is one which doesn't appear. I always struggle when an issue has been raised at committee as opposed to been discussed in section 106, and therefore discussion takes place elsewhere, for us to have a clear view as to how a decision will have, what impact the decision will have. In this case, I'm not sure I'm completely clear, notwithstanding Margaret's comments, that it is sustainable. And in the event it's not been sustainable, who is responsible to ensure that community space remains as such? It's an interesting one. Councillor Whitehead, do you want to make comment on this matter, or you could check?
Yes, Chair. So I agree that I think this seems potentially problematic, and I don't know whether we've received sufficient assurances from the applicant or officers about this actually being sustainable. But I guess in calculating the sustainability of the site, it seems to me that we need to understand what the total likely annual cost of the site will actually be in order to understand how much needs to be raised and therefore what the likelihood of that actually being achieved is. So my question is, how much approximately will it take to run this site in accordance with the intended specification of the community space as it stands today?
Okay. Before the officer responds, and I said we've gone down one of these rabbit holes, you see, which I daren't at times, and I tried not to. I was going to bring in Councillor Morris because she has experience with the ward, and it's not an uncommon arrangement, I know. Can I make this suggestion to you, Councillor Whitehead? And Margaret's Foley's advice was sound. That is that this is typically a matter dealt with at the negotiations section 106. And I'm not going to ask the officers how this issue has been resolved. I realise it has been brought up now, but I'm not proposing that this would interfere with our ability to make a decision today. Okay, I want to make that clear. And this is a level of detail we don't typically enter into, and maybe should have picked it up in the earlier briefing stage. If I ask of you, Councillor Whitehead, that we leave this matter to the section 106 final negotiation. Would that be reasonable? Would that be reasonable? Councillor Whitehead.
Like, I think it will potentially impact my decision if there's not further reassurances.
Okay, okay. I can see possibly Yvonne or Patrick might want to make any further comments on this one.
Yes, Chair. I think it is a perfectly legitimate point for your committee to consider. What I would say is, at the moment, what the development is doing is providing a space and committing to make a space available for the community to use in a way that the community feels fit in the future. And we don't have certainty, and it would be wrong, I think, for any of us to presume or seek to direct or limit the way that the community might wish to use that space in terms of activities that they carry on there, and some of which may benefit from grants, some of which may even have a revenue stream arising from them. And without that information, it's very difficult to say that a certain amount of money would be needed per year to maintain it long term. I think we've had, I think a genuine assurance from the applicant that they want to make this work, and they see that as a fundamental part of their overall scheme and their offer to the community. And I think they are making pump priming money available. And when Patrick was referring earlier, I think he was probably referring to Landmark Court, where we had a very, very long and detailed series of discussions with Bankside Open Spaces Trust about how that would be operated. And we came to a view as to how much that may need. And one of the things that was stressed to us at that point by BOST was that what they really needed was the reassurance of a capital sum, because that enabled them to offer that as leverage for grants, for instance, which I think is what one of the primary, as Clive Nicholl said earlier, they will have probably a pretty prestigious occupier for this building who may want to themselves help to support this thing. So I think it's probably a fairly incomplete and inadequate answer in some ways, But I think truthfully, it would be very hard to know unless we were going to seek to constrain or direct in some way what the community used this for, exactly how much it would cost to run per year.
Yes, that was my assessment as well. I can see two other digital hands, Councillor Whittam and Councillor O'Brien. Are they related to this subject? Councillor Whittam, first of all.
Yes, Chair, I just want to say that any voluntary sector organisation who was offered the running of this open space would absolutely bite their hand off, because it would be totally new facility, not going to be charged any rent, and are even going to be given £20,000 a year to start the ball rolling. So I don't have any qualms whatsoever about this at all.
Thank you, Councillor Whittam. Councillor Bryan, again, is this related to this subject?
No, different subject, Chair.
Oh, in that case, I won't take it just yet in that case, if I may.
Yeah, no problem.
In that case, I think Councillor Whitehead, going back to yourself, said it was a rabbit hole from once you entered it. And you're not going to be able to easily extricate ourselves, and this is why briefings and paperwork are sent to us well in advance. And but of course, perfect plans are always challenged at time of implementation. Councillor Whitehead, returning to yourself, and I note your comment, and obviously I of course share your concern, and of course officers have also indicated such at this point. If I may suggest to you that the Section 106 agreement negotiation, we might want to, and again, I'm guided by planning officers on this, because as it's been brought up here, and we want to be satisfied that the arrangements are sound, that there is, I know in other applications, we may have had the ward councillors have sight of the Section 106 agreement and give it a nod, for example. I'm not sure if a councillor wishes to engage in such behaviour. I'm not keen that it returns to committee. I'd like us to make a decision when we move forward, and so that therefore, if there is any follow-up involvement by members, that it might be a ward member who's been consulted on the arrangement to secure the community area. Would that be a reasonable suggestion, officers? I'll come back to you in a moment, Councillor Whitehead, but would Councillor Morris be willing? I wonder, first of all, but officers first of all, would that be a reasonable suggestion that ward councillors are consulted of the arrangements put in place to secure the negotiations on the community area? Would that be reasonable?
Simon may wish to comment, but we have done it before, not very often, but we have done it before, as I think you know. So if that was what members wish, then I'm sure we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, that's what I would say. I mean, clearly, what I would recommend you don't do is have continuous reference back to the committee on details of Section 106. You've given, if the committee gives its view as to what should be achieved in the Section 106 agreement, then consultation with the ward members would be a mechanism by which you could be reassured that that had been properly satisfied.
Very good. Thank you.
Chair, it's Margaret. May I just make one point?
Of course.
Noting, I don't have an issue with the suggestion. I just wish the committee to note that the deadline for completion of the agreement is currently the 22nd of March. And that's also going to have to allow time for the referral to the GLA. So members may wish to think about extending the deadline if there's to be any extensive consultation with ward members, because it's already going to be quite a tight deadline to get the agreement completed.
Thank you for that. But before I go into the question of extension, can I go to Councillor Morris? You've heard our dialogue. Would that be satisfactory from your point of view to be consulted on the arrangement for the community area?
Yeah, it would be satisfactory, but could I just make one request? So the other Section 106 community use scheme, etc., that we were consulted on was the fire station one, but sadly, by the time it came to the ward members, all other parties had signed off an agreement and we were pigeonholed into a corner so that, you know, it was too late to do anything or make any comments. So I'm happy for ward councillors to have sight of that if the committee is happy, but please don't come to us right at the end of the process when everyone else has signed it and we effectively can't change anything even if we wanted to.
So it should be genuine consultation, in other words. I think that's reasonable unless Margaret says otherwise. I believe that's reasonable. Fine. Thank you. And I'll now, if I may, move on to the question of the deadline. If I go back to planning officers, and it may be Mr. Nichols, but would it be reasonable for us to extend the deadline? I don't know if Patrick or Yvonne, yes.
You certainly have the power to do that, Chair. And of course, it doesn't stop us signing it more quickly than the deadline if every party has agreed by then. So I think it's in everybody's interest to keep these things moving. And
how, forgive me, Yvonne, if we were to do that, by how much time do you think it would be necessary or not, indeed?
I mean, I would have thought if I've got a calendar easily openable, but I would have thought sometime at the beginning of May, because we'd want to get it through to the GLA in any case if we can before the mayoral election.
Indeed, yes, indeed. Okay, beginning of May. And if I may, and I might suggest to colleagues in a few moments that that would therefore be the first week of May, maybe by May the 3rd, 2021. And I'll handle that as a part of the amendment later on. Okay, so we'll return to that, and that will be my proposal. But before I do that, I want to take Councillor O'Brien to resolve his outstanding question. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Alex, mainly because I can't have him sitting there like that all day. Alex, have you taken into account the trial of the lower traffic network on this? I know it's a trial, but there's a chance that it may get implemented. Has that been taken into account in discussing with the camp, with this developer?
No, that hasn't been taken into consideration when this development was assessed. But in any case, any sort of traffic modification will have to take into consideration the existing servicing arrangement for existing buildings. This building has an existing delivery area space, which will have to be taken into consideration like you do for other commercial buildings in the area of any traffic modification. So I don't think it should really affect the future servicing arrangement of this development. Plus, we did ask for delivery and service management plan. When it comes to the developer providing this document, they will have to take into consideration any future modification to the traffic arrangement and then explain to us how this development will going to be serviced.
Okay, so I take it from what you've just said that the current LTN has already taken into account the current servicing arrangements. Yeah?
Yes, okay. Councillor. That's how any modification to the highway in terms of routing of traffic, they have to take into consideration how existing commercial buildings are going to be serviced, continue to be serviced.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Ryan. And if I may, unless there are further questions, if I may, in that case, let's move forward and just gather up the debate we've had. So, first of all, the motion that I have before me would require that the legal agreement is entered into by the 22nd of March. I'm proposing that we amend that motion to read the 3rd of May 2021.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much for that. Secondly, the addendum, of course, contained a number of amendments, so I'll include reference to those amendments in this motion in a few moments. I believe, and as regards to the discussion we've just had in respect of the ward councillors, that is, of course, noted as part of our minutes that the committee is required, that as requested, that the ward councillors are consulted and there be meaningful consultation. And as Councillor Morris has indicated, that it's at an earlier stage rather than the last stage. And I think that's simply indicative. So we don't need to make that. There's not a motion. There's not a motion required for that. It's simply recorded as such. And I believe I've covered all the bases, unless someone says otherwise. Are we all happy with that? Great. In that case, then I will proceed as follows. I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendation set out in paragraph 1 of the report and page 19 of the main agenda pack. That subject to the amendment noted in the addendum, that the full planning permission be granted for application 28P 1537, subject to conditions, referral to the Mayor of London and the applicant entering into a satisfactory legal agreement. That in the event that the legal agreement is not entered into by the 3rd of May 2021, the Director of Planning be authorised to refuse planning permission, if appropriate, for the reasons set out in paragraph 372 of the report. Right. Is there a seconder?
Seconded.
Very good. In that case, I will now go to the usual call for you to indicate if you are for or against or abstain the application. I will begin with the Vice Chair, Councillor Morel. Are you for, against or abstain the application? Councillor Morel?
Yes, I'm for, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Livingston, for, against or abstain?
For, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor O'Brien, for, against or abstain?
For, Chair.
Councillor Whitehead, for, against or abstain?
For, Chair.
Councillor Whittam, for, against or abstain?
For, Chair.
Councillor Williams, for, against or abstain?
For, Chair.
Now, I believe we may, Councillor Soames, I believe she may have had to
I'm
go.
still here.
Oh, you are there. Oh,
yeah, just for this item. I vote in favour, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Soames. And I'm Councillor Martin Seaton, and I'm for the application. The application has been passed unanimously. Thank you very much, and all those who have contributed. The time is now 10 past 1. I propose that we take a 5-minute